Hello and welcome to episode number 74 of Week in Review. My name is Sean, and on this week's show, we're going to talk about Men in Black International, Toy Story 3, and we'll look forward to this week's new releases. First up on this week's show is Men in Black International, and it kind of sucks to say, but I walked away from this movie a little disappointed with it. I was excited for it because I think it has a lot of good pieces in place to make something special or at least interesting, and it kind of fumbles that away in frustrating ways. This isn't necessarily the most disappointing movie, but it's kind of that like frustration by a few different plot points sort of thing that makes you, or made me at least, feel a little more frustrated with the flow of the movie. We'll start with the good though, and that is Chris Hemsworth, Tessa Thompson, Emma Thompson, and Kumail Nanjiani. And we've seen Chris Hemsworth and Tessa Thompson work with each other in Thor Ragnarok and really be able to bounce that like comedic back and forth off of each other, and it was really entertaining and probably one of the strongest points of Thor Ragnarok, aside from like the visual style they went with and actually making Thor like an interesting and engaging character, which I don't think they had done a particularly good job of up until that point, but that's a different movie. So when they announced this movie, when they said, hey, we're rebooting Men in Black, which is fantastic in my book because I really like Men in Black. I think it's a brilliant idea. Like, here's this entire sort of government agency that, I don't know why I paused so much during that. I could not think of the word government. I was like, there's gonna be there. Just keep talking. Words will form into your head and come out into the microphone. But having this like super secret government agency deal with aliens that are in plain sight, but they work with them to keep them protected is really, really cool. The neuralizer is a great plot device to kind of write people out of situations. And when I think of Men in Black, I think of the first movie because when I was younger, we watched that movie on VHS so many times. I think there was one time we counted how many times they cursed, and if I remember correctly, it's like 38. I don't remember. That may have actually been one specific word that they said a bunch. It doesn't matter. But that's like my memory of Men in Black 1 is fond. It's a big, fun, cool-looking summer action movie. Will Smith was a huge star at the time. Tommy Lee Jones is a really good pairing with him. Like, it worked in a way that I don't think a lot of people saw coming, and I really liked it. So when they announced Men in Black International, I was like, okay, like, it's not like the most exciting thing in the world, but it's not the most like disappointing. A lot of times, especially like in the day and age that we live in now, you see people who are like, they're going to ruin my childhood. And it's like, I don't give a shit. Like, I don't care. Reboot, whatever. You always have the original. Like, that's always going to be there. As soon as they announced Chris Hemsworth and Tessa Thompson, I went, oh, okay. This at least could be interesting and actually could be something really, really cool. Then you kind of start to fill out that cast a little bit, and I get more excited because I like Emma Thompson. She's just a joy to have on screen, and I love Kumail Nanjiani. He's in a bunch of different stuff, but obviously his big thing for me is going to be The Big Sick, which is a terrific movie and one of probably my favorite, like, straight up, like, romantic comedy. I know that Shaun of the Dead is technically a romantic comedy, but that also contains zombies, so it's like a weird, like, me being very picky and not government, but semantical with how I'm putting things where I'm putting them. But The Big Sick is a terrific movie, and you should watch it. I have talked about like two other movies at this point, and I still haven't really talked about my problems with Men in Black. So it has a good cast, and at the very least, I thought interesting. I thought like the floor of this movie was pretty high. Like, I didn't think it was going to be that bad. And I thought the ceiling of it was actually very high because they have such a strong cast and core concept that they could really make something interesting. Really, all you have to do is kind of remake the first movie, maybe change some characteristics around with the main two characters, take the brilliant idea of the Men in Black itself, and just kind of run with it. And they don't do that. And that's where it's so frustrating. I really like Tessa Thompson's character. She is engaging and determined and fun and like just a character that you root for. I thought Chris Hemsworth's character was up and down a little bit, where there were times where I was like, how are you an agent? You are an utter buffoon. Like, how are you here in this like high-ranking area of like a government? Like, what is happening? Why why are you making these decisions? The same thing about like why are you making these decisions can be attributed to the overall story, which is way too convoluted for its own good. Like it's not like saying that sounds a little bit dramatic, where it's like, oh, Sean, it's not that difficult or hard to follow. And it's like in the grading curve of a Men in Black movie, it absolutely is. It gets way too bogged down in this stupid conspiracy plot that just drags the movie, and it's not interesting and it's not fun, and it throws the pacing of the movie off to where it's like big cool fun action sequence with some special effects that are really not done well at times. Like there's one sequence in particular, it's in the trailers, but there's one where Chris Hemsworth is on a motorbike, but of course it has to fly because it's alien technology, and there are so many shots in that sequence in particular that are just like, you really should have done this differently from the chase sequence and then use that as like an escape mechanism instead. That way you can cut down on the number of green screen shots that are so clearly and obviously green screen shots, or maybe done a better job building the sets or something. Like there's got to be a better way around that still incorporates that information, or that plot device, that vehicle that looks cool, but the way it's implemented is super rough. So it goes from that, which like big fun action sequence, to this like way too boring, like, oh, who's the mole and there's a conspiracy and blah, I don't care. Like this, it drags it down, and this is where it starts to kind of become that disappointment by poor decisions, where it throws the pacing of the movie off and is kind of frustrating enough to where like I started getting annoyed with it, where I was like, I don't want to talk about this conspiracy thing anymore. And it just threw the rhythm of the movie off, and so there are large sections where it doesn't seem like they're trying to make jokes, and then there are other sections where they are trying to make jokes, but I kind of just lost my funness with this movie, and that was the first thing I thought of when I walked out of this movie was, I should have had way more fun watching this, and it sucks that I didn't. And I feel like my expectations weren't particularly high, and I was still like a little bummed of like, that just didn't turn out well. Like it doesn't work cohesively. It gets super clunky from a pacing perspective late in the movie, where it seems like it's going to wrap up, and I'm like, what? Like I don't ever look at my phone in the theater, but I actually had the thought when I saw it on Thursday night of, I need to check my phone because this cannot be the end. Like that happened. One, it happened super abruptly. Two, there are a bunch of plot ends that are left loose, and it's just this super sudden stop of like, okay, and da da da. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't work the way you want it to. It doesn't sound like that big of a deal, but when you have so many pieces where it seems like it's going to be in the right place with who you have casted and the cool concept behind it, when that stuff happens and it kind of falls apart in a way, you're just like, it's like that extra little like bump of bummer instead of just kind of like it's like whatever. I didn't really have that much interest in the first place. I walked out not that interested. I walked in with a greater amount of interest than I would have guessed I would have had for a fourth movie in this particular franchise, and still walked out disappointed, and that really sucks. Everyone's good in their roles, and even if you're kind of frustrated with the characters, it still feels like that movie where I should be having more fun with it. There's a character in there that kind of sucks. I think his name's Arthur or something. I don't know. He's really boring. He has a bad turn towards the end. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't really work. One of the bigger things I was worried about going into this movie was the character that Kumail Nanjiani plays is completely CGI, and I was really worried because the pacing of the trailers felt off, and it seemed like his lines weren't going to work super well, but they did some good stuff with his character, and they have some good back and forth, and there's like a really quiet scene after like the market chase with the big alien motorcycle or whatever, where there's a good like back and forth between the three of those characters that I really enjoyed. And I don't know, the movie has bright spots, and I think the ending of it leaves it in a good place to continue this particular franchise. I personally would have preferred more Emma Thompson. I just really like watching her on screen. I don't know. There are positives to take away from this movie, and I would watch another one in this franchise because I like the cast that they have so much. It's a bummer that I can't recommend it more. But it also sits in this kind of weird spot where I can't not recommend it. Like I'm not so vehemently against it where it's like you don't ever watch this movie, but it's also like I'm not on the opposite side where I'm like you have to go see this immediately. This is like a good Sunday afternoon lazy day, just hanging out, want to watch a whatever movie sort of Redbox sort of thing or Netflix or whatever. Like there's enjoyment to be had. It's just not anything that's going to wow you, and that's kind of a bummer. Our second movie is Toy Story 3, and this is the last one before Toy Story 4. I am so excited for Toy Story 4. And this movie, Toy Story 3, came after an 11-year wait after 1999's Toy Story 2. And I remember going into this being like, I really love Toy Story 1 and Toy Story 2. Can they do it? I can't think of like the perfect trilogy of movies. I know people really like The Godfather, but people don't really seem to like number 3. Star Wars seems to have the problem with their third movie, Return of the Jedi, as well. And Indiana Jones is the Temple of Doom is the most divisive. People really love it. Some people really don't like it. But none of those... 1, I haven't seen The Godfather. 2, I don't really care about Star Wars. And 3, I think Temple of Doom is terrible. So all of those trilogies are kind of eliminated for me. And so this was the first real chance for like a masterpiece trilogy of like, these are 3 perfect movies that all came out and they're amazing. And after 11 years gone away, you just wonder like, how can they top themselves with this? Like, what can they possibly do to expand this universe or to make this work as a trilogy? It's been 11 years. Like, is it still going to be as effective as the other 2 movies are? Is it still going to have all the heart and the humor and all that stuff? And my goodness, does it. This movie is perfection. It's absolutely masterfully done. This movie has a tremendous opening sequence with like one last playtime with Andy and the toys. Maybe not one last, but one last time they show us Andy playing with the toys. And I used this word last week when I talked about Toy Story 2, but there is a tremendous sense of cohesion between the 3 movies. Like watching them back to back to back or in back to back to back weeks makes it a little bit more obvious, and I'm sure that people who are a little more like quick thinking on their feet got the references of like, here's my attack dog with a force field, and here's my dinosaur that eats force field dogs. That's from the first movie. Death by Monkeys is from the second movie. Like there's all these really nice, sweet callbacks to the first 2 movies that really make it feel like a full and realized world. There's also a brilliant use of advancing time from like, hey, here's this thing where he's like 7 or so, 6 or 7, somewhere in that age, and Molly's like a really little kid. And then fast forward, and we get some glimpses into growing up a little bit, and we see the toys after an amount of time, 11 years presumably. I'm not 100% sure on that. He's 17 here, but I don't know if they ever give his age in the other 2 movies. Also, it's weird that this particular movie advances the timeline so far when the second movie didn't really advance the timeline all that much from the first. It's odd. Obviously, it doesn't take anything away from it. These movies feel like they work like extra well for me because of when they came out. Like the first one came out when I was 5, the second one came out when I was 9, the third one came out when I was 20. And this movie deals a lot with like moving on and, maybe moving on from childish things and stuff like that. I know that I haven't done a particularly good job of moving on from childish things, considering there are a bunch of pop vinyls and toys on shelves behind me. And that was one thing that I was like, I wonder how this works, because we live in kind of like a weird like cultural time of like superheroes and comic books and toys are all like very popular and kind of accepted in a way for older people to have. So I don't know, it still works because like mentally in my own head, I think like, okay, 20, even though I didn't go to college, I did move away when I was 20, and it does definitely feel like it hits that spot of like, okay, now it's like time to grow up and move on. And I think those themes and the things it talks about really resonate. I think this movie is brilliant and heartfelt and just incredible. I loved watching it, and this movie is where I think I first started to realize kind of like what pacing was, because when I watched the first like couple movies, I'm like, yeah, like I really enjoy this. These are really good. They move in a really nice way. It flows well together. But like watching this movie, I remember just being like, this hour and 40 minutes flew by. Like it is immaculately done, where things happen and everything's interesting, and I love the way that it's designed as an escape movie. Like, it has all those kind of like cliches, but they all have like little twists on them. I love that this movie also feels like more of an ensemble movie. It was something that peaked up a little bit more. The ensemble aspect peaked up a little bit more in Toy Story 2 with Buzz and the gang going to get Woody from Owl's apartment, I guess that would be, yeah. And with Toy Story 1 being more of like a buddy comedy sort of movie, this movie feels like a full-fledged ensemble movie. Like, everybody gets their moment to shine, everybody gets their humorous lines. Buzz Lightyear goes through a lot in this movie. He gets switched to demo mode, he gets turned back into Spanish mode. Mr. Potato Head gets to be a tortilla potato head, where his hat lands so perfectly when it flips around, and it's just like, it's really, really fun to watch. This movie has a great setup in that they accidentally get donated to Sunnyside, and they think it's going to be the greatest thing in the world because they're so desperate to be played with. Like, early in the movie, we see them try Operation Playtime, and Andy doesn't really seem to care, and so they're really questioning themselves. And after kind of a weird series of events where Andy's mom thinks that they are trash, they get put out on the curb with an exciting sequence that involves scissors and a peek at Sid, who became a garbage man. So there's that. They end up going to Sunnyside, and things aren't quite what they seem. I think that aspect is really interesting. I like the idea that Lotso is so two-faced, and I like his backstory. It's kind of like a twist on what happens if Jesse's a jerk instead of like a nice person who's like frustrated with the world. Bonnie is a great character. I love the new toys that they introduce, specifically Trixie, voiced by Kristen Schaal, who I love very much. She's great. You also get Mr. Prickle Pants and the one other character that I can't ever remember the name of, the unicorn. And then there's like the peas in the pod, but the clown giving the backstory and really setting things up to where it is like a prison escape, and I think that's really awesome. The escape sequence is a lot of fun. It's very exciting. That monkey is creepy as hell. It's something with the eyes. Something about the eyes, like, just really get under my skin and on my nerves. I'm like, this is a movie for kids. It creeps me out, and I'm like 20 to 29. Like, I was like a little 6-year-old dealing with this. Once they get out and, well, they think they get out and they get sent to the dump, that's where the movie takes a much darker turn than I think a lot of people would anticipate a movie of this type would take, and it's all the better for it. It's also its most gut-punching and heart-wrenching moment. For whatever reason, whenever Bullseye struggles against all of the ground-up garbage, like, that's what gets me, and the way they all hold hands and they've accepted their fate is like tremendously emotional, and it works because the other two movies are so good. If you don't have the build-up of the first and the second Toy Story movies, this climactic event, this like, we're going to lose these characters that we've come to love so much over the last 15 years, that's not going to mean anything. But because those movies are so good, it means a lot. It means a hell of a lot. And it's so, like, it's so great and so well done. And they're not done punching you in the gut yet. Like, they somehow do that. I guess, spoiler alert, they get out of it by the claw, which is awesome. They give Mr. and Mrs. Potato Head the terrific duo line of, "You have saved our lives, and we are eternally grateful." And that's, like, it's so sweet, and it just feels so good. And then watching Andy donate the toys and seeing how hard it is for him to let go of that sort of thing is tremendously, like, satisfying and sad and wonderful, and, like, oh, it's so good. It's just a tremendous movie from start to finish. Lotso's a terrific villain. Ken is a lot of fun. He's a little bit, like, kind of doofy, but, like, still kind of not great, but kind of good-hearted. Barbie is awesome. It's a movie that is perfection from start to finish, and I can't tell you enough, like, how much I love Toy Story 3. It is the perfect end cap to a movie trilogy. It makes it the best movie trilogy ever made. It exceeded every expectation I had of it, and it crushed every single doubt that I have of this franchise. Like, if you look at Pixar, some of their sequels haven't been quite as good as some of their other stuff. They've also picked a lot of movies that I haven't been particularly interested in from the start. You're looking at, like, The Incredibles, Finding Nemo and the Cars franchise, like, are the big three that they put out big sequels to. Obviously, there's a prequel, Monsters University, which feels like a very different type of movie. Like, it's a straight comedy, buddy comedy sort of thing. I really like Monsters University because Monsters Inc. is my favorite Pixar movie overall. So going into Toy Story 4, I've actually been relatively hesitant. It's also an astonishing fact that I have seen exactly one full-length trailer in the theater for Toy Story 4. Considering how many times I go to the movies, how frequently I go to the movies, that is an astonishing fact, especially because I've seen the Dog movie trailer 4 or 5 times, the other Dog movie trailer twice, Stuber and My Spy at least like 4 or 5 times. I figured Toy Story 4 would be all over the place, but it's not, and I'm really excited about that. I saw the one trailer. I mean, obviously I was going to be excited about Toy Story 4 anyway. It doesn't matter. I saw the one trailer. I loved what I saw. I cannot wait to see the 4th movie. And to try and wrap this back into the point about Pixar sequels, this is the one that I'm the most confident in them nailing. I saw Incredibles 2 last year. It was fine. It was a little bit too long. And their sequels haven't been particularly good. I don't think Pixar's ever made a bad movie necessarily, but they haven't really picked stuff that I've been super interested in. And Toy Story kind of sets itself in its own echelon. Like, they are Toy Story sequels, and then there are the rest of the Pixar stuff. And it's so far and above better than everything else that they've done from a, like, franchise standpoint. There are a couple of movies that I put ahead of Toy Story 3. I usually put Toy Story 3 overall in, like, that 3rd or 4th spot. Usually switches with Inside Out. It just depends. It literally depends on the day. Like, some days I'll be like, yeah, Toy Story 3, number 3. Some days I'll be like Inside Out number 3, Up is number 2, and then Monsters Inc. is number 1, in case you're curious. And then number 5 would be something like Coco or Toy Story 1, one of those two. Just in case you're curious about what that top 6 would be. Toy Story 3 is the movie that I look at and I'm like, they can crush it with Toy Story 4. They can absolutely destroy every doubt I have. They can exceed every one of my most outrageous expectations, like reasonably outrageous expectations, which I realize is kind of an oxymoron, but like, it's not like they're going to put 55 free Buzz Lightyears, one under every seat, and I'm going to walk away with a free Buzz Lightyear. That's absurd. That's ridiculous. But I have complete and total faith in them to crush and nail Toy Story 4, and I can't wait to see it. And Toy Story 3 is a perfect movie. It is a perfect end to a perfect trilogy. It is the best trilogy ever made. The other one that I would put up in that category would be the Cornetto trilogy, which is a very different type of thing and very much like a me sort of preference thing. It has been an absolute joy to watch these 3 movies. I keep talking about it when I'm reviewing these movies, or however you want to phrase it. The term review on this show is incredibly loose, but it has been a complete and total joy and a reinvigoration of how much I love these characters and why I love these characters, and I love this franchise. And Toy Story 4 can't get here soon enough. Finally on the show, we'll look forward to this week's new releases. There's one thing you should care about. One thing and one thing only. There are 2 other things that I'm going to mention briefly, but the big tentpole situation that comes out this week is Toy Story 4 in theaters. Go see Toy Story 4 in theaters. If you haven't bought tickets already, go buy tickets. Okay, this sounds like an ad. It's not an ad. It could be an ad. Toy Story or Disney or Pixar, whoever. The ad, you can wear it right here on my shirt. Toy Story 4. The 4 might get cut off, but it'll be good. On Blu-ray is Us, which is a movie I reviewed and liked a lot when it came out in theaters back in late February, early March, somewhere in there. And as for the games, Judgment comes out on Friday, and that's digital only until next Tuesday, the 25th, when it comes out physically. It has a super weird release schedule, but it looks kind of cool. It's from the makers of the Yakuza series, and it seems like it's more of like a detective sort of thing, so that kind of speaks to me a little bit as a person who loved L.A. Noire. So I'm very curious about that game, but it might be a little bit before I get to it. There will be streams on Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday this week, so be sure to check twitch.tv/SeanosaurusRex. If you're thinking, man, that's not very much information, what are you playing this week? I don't really know. There's going to be a Toy Story 4 hype stream on Wednesday, but I don't know exactly which game I'm going to play. And then Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, I have no idea what's going to be played. So check that out if you're interested. I know there's not a lot of information, but they'll be fun, I think. They'll be fun. I should say that more confidently. They'll be fun streams. Come hang out and watch the streams. Is that confident enough for you? Thank you for watching this week's episode. If you enjoyed the content, scroll on down and hit that subscribe button. If you liked it enough, you can scroll on down even more and let me know what you thought of Men in Black International and Toy Story 3. You can let me know about your E3 stuff, because it still is kind of like the dust is still settling from that. You can check out my E3 predictions and reactions. They are two separate streams. I played Halo and talked about E3. They're pretty exciting. Check out the streams on twitch.tv/Shaunosaurus Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and then you'll be all ready for a week in review every Tuesday right here. So we'll see you next week.